Welcome everyone. I like to once in a while answer questions on Quora. This one's a little bit blasphemous, and I see a blasphemous response to it, but I'm going to give my response. So the question is, does Judaism really need a third temple, or is it a stupid and weird idea for nowadays? The answer I would give is, if we don't need a temple, then we don't need the Holy Land. The whole entire goal of the Jewish return to the Holy Land is ultimately the rebuilding of the temple. And if people believe that the return of the Holy Land is just something to either fight anti-Semitism or give self-determination or some other nonsense like that, they've totally missed the point. The point of the Jewish return to the Holy Land that we've been praying for since the temple has been destroyed is the restoration of the Holy Temple and the restoration of the sacrificial cult. That is what it's all about. That's what we pray for as we finish our prayers 3 times a day and 4 times on certain days. We ask, Yiratzim Ufanecha Hashem Elokeinu V'Gudesheinu, may be thy will, O Lord our God and God of our ancestors, Sheyaboneh Beis HaMikdash B'meir B'meinu, that the temple be rebuilt soon in our days. V'sein Chelkeinu B'Serasecha, and give our portion in thy Torah and thy law. And there we will serve you with pious awe and fear, as it was in the ancient times, in the old days. In a sense, there's a certain holy chutzpah there that we ask God to rebuild the temple, because if we had the temple back, then we would pray better. So we finish our prayers and we think, you know what, maybe this prayer wasn't so good. Maybe I could have concentrated a little bit better. But if everything were restored to the way that it's supposed to be, so then everything would be better. If God is unhappy with what we are doing now, so bring us back to the old days. However, the question is, does Judaism need it now? The answer is obviously no. At this very moment, we don't have the temple, and Judaism is doing fine without the temple. Judaism can live and survive without the temple. Judaism, as given by God and passed down through the ages, through the traditions of our rabbis, is a portable religion that can survive without the temple as a religion. But the yearning for the temple is fundamental to our religious life. In a certain sense, the reason why the Sadducees went extinct was because their religion was so closely tied to the temple.
In 2 miles, take the interchange on the right.
But the rabbinical Judaism, as it's called, which is the original Judaism given by God to Moses, continues as a portable religion because that's how it was designed, and that's how it always was. And our religion can survive without a temple. But the fundamental idea is that we remember the temple. We have so many rabbinical decrees, mostly from Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai, that are in place to commemorate the temple, to remind us of the temple, and to keep us waiting for the restoration of the temple. And at this point, essentially, the temple that we're waiting for is the temple that we're waiting for.
In half a mile, use the right 2 lanes to take exit 6 for I-276 west toward Penn Turnpike.
And so with that being said, that's why I prefer the view of Rashi, that the temple will come from heaven. when it comes to eschatology,
Use the right 2 lanes to take exit 6.
That is severely unhealthy, politically, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, religiously,
Continue for 9 miles.
communally, to believe that we can accomplish anything toward the actualization of eschatology through political or other means. And among those things is a reason why I find myself belonging to the camp that opposes Zionism. But with all that being said, I look forward to the time when God will bring the temple from heaven. And when that happens, it won't be nowadays anymore. Satmarav always explained, why do we say next year in Jerusalem? And so in Jewish law, we have different ideas of years. And one of the ideas of a year is the year of a reign of a king. And so that when a king begins his reign, it essentially starts a new year as far as the year of the reign of the king, to the point where, as if a king would be coronated in the Jewish tradition right now, being the 23rd day of Adar, this week we would say the first year of the reign of King so-and-so. And then next week, when it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which is called Rosh Hashanah LaMalochim, it's called the New Year for the Kings, that would become the second year of the reign of King so-and-so. And if he would reign for a year and then another a few days, 2 weeks, meaning a week before Rosh Chodesh Nisan and a week after next year Rosh Chodesh Nisan, it would be considered 3 years of his reign, even though it was only a little bit more than a year, 54 weeks. Or even if it was a day, it was 2 days more than a week, whatever it is. With that being said, now we understand the concept of saying next year in Jerusalem. We're not just talking about being physically in Jerusalem, having a political presence in Jerusalem. We're talking about the restoration of the Davidic kingdom and the restoration of the Holy Temple. And when that happens, it will be a new year. It will be a new time. And so it won't be nowadays anymore. It will be a completely different metaphysical manifestation of the epoch of which we live in history. And so yes, for right now, it's weird. And it's not only that, but it's not necessary. Because God has made it clear that it's not necessary in as much as we don't have it. And if someone would wantonly go and try to build a temple without anything supernatural, just by physical means, even if it would be essentially the fulfillment of the mitzvah of Asali Mikdash V'Shechanti B'Socha, make me a temple, I'll dwell in them. Nonetheless, halachically speaking, it would be problematic from the standpoint of Jewish law, to a certain extent of extra-biblical Jewish law, but even within the biblical milieu of how there were prophets and so forth, we don't know exactly where the temple is supposed to be. There's a lot of issues why we cannot build a temple, why we need to wait for Elijah the prophet, not because of his prophecy, but because of his Masorah, because he has a succession from Moses of discipleship, that he would be able to tell us exactly where the temple is supposed to be and so forth. And so for that reason, we look forward to that which is prophesied in the book of Malachi. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord. So for someone to say, as this fellow is saying, I have no interest in the temple, it's part of our past, I'm happy for to stay there, that's blasphemous. But to say right now, but also to say, well, let's just go build a temple. Certainly, it would be, at the very least, a violation of Pekuach Nefesh. We're not allowed to do things that are dangerous. And with the current political climate in the Holy Land, to attempt something like that would put the Jewish people in danger and lead to war. And we're not allowed to do anything to instigate war, which is also one of the reasons why we shouldn't have a Jewish state at all, because it instigates wars. You don't go and sit in a lion's den and not expect to get bitten. We're a peace-loving people, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, God designed it that at this current time, the people who are in the Holy Land around us, they don't like us. And so it's a sign that it's not the right time, and that we should, instead of being, Deuteronomy 13 warns us against being impressed by miracles, and all these people say, look what happened, 6-day war, this and that's a sign that this is what God wants. No. God put us in exile for a reason, and until Elijah the prophet comes to announce the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord, and the coming of the Messiah, we're supposed to remain an exiled people. Doesn't mean that we can't live humbly in the Holy Land, but as we did for centuries, when we were living under Muslim rule, we did so accepting dimitude and paying the jizah, and we hope and pray for the day when that won't be necessary anymore. But all these people saying, oh, look, well, it was worse then, but they weren't killing us like they are now. And it wasn't the wars. And so I'd rather be a living dhimmi than a dead soldier if living in the Holy Land is something that's important, and you want to make this religious devotion, you can do it as a dhimmi. You don't need to have a Jewish state to live in the Holy Land. But is it really that important? It really isn't. It's a nice thing if you can do it, but there are certain people who have turned it into something that's so fundamental that it replaces all the other aspects of Judaism. It was actually Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, who the religious Zionists claimed to be the one who set the precedent for their ideology. He actually, believe it or not, wrote the following. He said that just like we took out of our liturgy the Ten Commandments because there were heretical sects that believed that all there was the Ten Commandments and nothing else. And so for that reason, even though the Ten Commandments are very important,
in a quarter mile, keep right to stay on I-95 South. Follow signs for Philadelphia.
we removed it from our liturgy because of these heretics.
Keep right to stay on I-95 South.
So Rabbi Kook said that for the same reason, that because there's a heretical sect
Continue on I-95 South for 19 miles.
that all that is necessary is the Holy Land, and to drop all of the other commandments, Rabbi Kook said, who the religious Zionists say is their Rebbe, Rabbi Kook said, it's better perhaps to stop having emphasis on the Holy Land, even though the Holy Land is very important in our religion, but to de-emphasize the Holy Land just as the rabbis de-emphasize the Ten Commandments by removing it from our liturgy, because of the heretical sect that believed that there was only the Ten Commandments and not the other commandments, so too because of these heretics that we should remove the emphasis in the Holy Land. This is Rabbi Kook. So we see now the horrors. Constantly the Zionists claim they need their Medina, they need their state, they need their Tzahal, they need their army to prevent another Holocaust. Why didn't they prevent October 7th? They knew it was going to happen, but they let that happen because certain things grow on plants. Plants grow with water. Zionism grows with Jewish blood. They have no regard for Jewish lives. This has nothing to do with the Arabs who suddenly in the 60s started to call themselves Palestinians. a pox on both of their houses. This has to do with, and most of them come from Jordan and Egypt, and many of them were Jews who were forced to apostatize, the descendants of Jews who were forced to apostatize, and many of them, just like throughout our history, apostate Jews have been the bane of our existence. Many of those who are called Palestinians, the only ones who might be, quote unquote, whatever they mean by that, indigenous to the Holy Land, are the ones who are actually of Jewish ancestry. And that happened at least twice in the history of the Jewish community in the Holy Land. In the 1890s, after Herzl Yimach Shemo, the Muslim community forced a lot of Jews in Jerusalem to convert, and that's why there's one so-called Palestinian tribe called the Al-Quds tribe, and they were of Jewish ancestry. And then there's also the Hebroni tribe, that there's a tribe, and many, for the most part, the Hebron tribe, which were forced to convert to Islam in 1929, many of them still observe Jewish practices clandestinely, much as the Anusim, the so-called Marranos, did in the times of the Spanish Inquisition. So those are actually what you would call indigenous to the Holy Land. But most of the others are not even from the Holy Land. Arafat was Egyptian, Yimach Shemo v'Zichro, and others. So that's neither here nor there. But if you have a connection to Holy Land, so then that is predicated on a connection to the temple. Because the whole reason for our devotion to the Holy Land is because of the commandments that one can fulfill in the Holy Land that one cannot fulfill anywhere else in the world. And many of those commandments, perhaps most of them, is to say that most of those commandments not only apply in the Holy Land, but they only apply in the temple. And so if we talk about 613 commandments, about half of those 613 depend on the temple or the Holy Land. And so that's why we seek that connection to God through these commandments. But the way I remember hearing, I believe it was Rabbi Orlovsky, explained it like this. Imagine a child one Friday has a feeling of filial love, parental love for his mother, and he brings her, in honor of Shabbos, flowers, and she's so touched, this young child, that he could be so connected that he would say, "Oh, I'm going to bring my mother flowers." And he was so impressed by how much his mother was happy with the flowers that he did it again the next week. And again, the mother was so happy. And he kept doing that for weeks and weeks. One day, it's a summer day, he has a long Friday, school is out early, yeshiva is out early, and he went to go play ball with his friends, and he forgot about the flowers, and quickly he ran, and he picked up some dandelions from the ground, something that were half wilted, and he said, "Mom, here's your stupid flowers." And the mother says, "Not about the flowers, it's about the feeling. So forget about the flowers. I don't need your flowers anymore." And so too, prophets bring Lama li roiv tevchechem, right? Prophet Isaiah and other prophets say I did not command your ancestors concerning the sacrifices. What do I need all your sacrifices for? Why are you trampling my courtyards? That if our connection is just by rote and not with intense emotional connection, so all right, forget about it. What do I need it for? And so God took away the burden of the sacrifices, the burden of the temple, and said, you know what, focus. And then he took us out of the Holy Land, because were we doing what we're supposed to do? Were we keeping the laws of the sabbatical and so forth, that and the tithing and all of the different laws that are connected to the Holy Land? Agricultural laws, no. People trample on those. They look for excuses to not keep them and so forth. So what do we have then? So we have about 150 commandments out of the 613 we can do. And God's message is, focus on these. Try your best to connect with these. And if you can accomplish that, maybe we'll go back to the way things used to be. But if a parent puts a child, if a parent grounds a child, tells him, go to your room until I tell you get out. I'm not going to tell you how long it'll be. Just when the time comes, I'll tell you when it'll come out. The child comes out after 2 hours and says, you know what? I learned my lesson. I'm ready to get out. This make the parent more angry. And that's what we see now. God put us in exile. He didn't tell. All he told us is, wait for Elijah the prophet. And a bunch of heretics, atheists, communists, people who spit in the face of God.
There are police reported ahead.
We don't need. We're going to take over the Holy Land. And then some religious people like, ooh, well-meaning religious people, nice people, good people, said, oh, this is a sign God wants us to leave the exile. Just makes it more angry. And as Satmarov said in the Vayel Moshe, if an arsonist wakes up his victims, that doesn't make the arsonist a hero. And it's the same thing here. Until Herzl, we lived relatively in peace with the Muslim world. There's really no reason for Jews and Muslims to be fighting. We have a shared theology, and the differences in our religion are rather minuscule. All right, so they have 2 prophets we don't have. Big deal. They don't think the way the other religions.
There are police reported ahead.
That one of those prophets was God. They're not idolaters. They just think he's a prophet. Maybe they also think he's a Messiah. They have a different definition of what that means. They don't exactly understand what it means. No. All right, that's what they believe. That doesn't hurt anyone. All right, so they pray 5 times a day instead of 3 times a day. What's wrong with that? All right, they're not Jewish. They could eat other things. They go out of their way not to eat pigs, which they're allowed to under Jewish law. Only Jews are not allowed to eat pigs. But they're also allowed to avoid eating it, and it's a pious thing. All right, but they also eat shellfish and rabbits and camels that we don't eat. Oh, they're allowed to. They don't have to follow kosher. So what are we talking about here? Why are we fighting with them? We never used to fight with them. But the only thing is that the religion says that if you're in one of the countries that's under their rule, you're welcome as a people of the book to live as a second-class citizen and pay a tax, and you will be protected if you do so. And you don't have to convert to their religion, even though they really want everyone to convert to their religion. They'll accept that. But if you try to take it over, then they consider that an act of war. And what did they do? For centuries, the Jewish people accepted that. We understood we were in exile and we lived in peace with our Muslim neighbors. And so during Ramadan, when everyone had to go to the masjid and on the Eid, so the Jewish people would babysit the Arab kids. And when and it was Yom Kippur and the mothers would go to shul, or other times when women go to shul, the Arabs would babysit the Jewish kids. We lived in peace, and we even lived in enough peace that we trusted each other with our children. We trusted that they wouldn't feed our children something not kosher, and they trusted that we wouldn't feed their children something that was not halal, something that was haram. And we all lived in peace and love. Then came along the Zionist movement, just as predicted, that if we tried to overthrow the exile and not accept that God put us into exile as a punishment, that the Jewish people would be in danger and all over the world. And it wasn't 40, 50 years after Herzl Yamach Shemo that Hitler Yamach Shemo came, because of this violation of the promise that we made. People say, well, it's not halacha. Well, who cares if it's not halacha? It happened. We violated the oaths, and it says if you violate the oaths, you'll have a Holocaust. Rashi says, it's that Ani Matir B'Sarchim, the Gemara says, that I will permit your flesh, Lashon Hefker, that it's a terminology of being ownerless. And what happened? And great and holy saints died as martyrs to atone for this horrific sin. And we should have learned a lesson, and we could have, right after the Holocaust, we could have had a Mashiach. But instead, the anti-Mashiach, the Antichrist, the Zionists came, set up their state, and prevented Mashiach from coming, prevented the Messiah from coming, prevented the promised world peace, when nation will not lift up sword against nation, and neither will they learn of war anymore. And no one will have to teach them about God, because they will all know them from least of them to greatest of them, because the knowledge of the Lord will cover the world as the waters cover the seas. This is what we're looking forward to. Not just having a piece of land and the size of New Jersey and a blue and white flag and falafel and hatikva and all the sinful behavior in Dizengoff Square or whatever. That was not our hope for 2,000 years. That was not Tikva Seinu Shnois Alpayim. We were waiting for the coming of the Mashiach that wouldn't only be a benefit for the Jewish people, but be a benefit for the whole world. That we'd have world peace, we'd have prosperity and happiness, and most of all, the ability to keep all 613 commandments with the restoration of the Holy Temple, unlike the Zionists who are looking for excuses to not keep the sabbatical year. The Gemara says, the Mishnah says, and it's really right in the Chumash, it's right in the Pentateuch, in the book of Leviticus. Then the land will be satisfied for its sabbaticals. And Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, Golus Bala Olam al Shmitas Haaretz. Al Shmitas Damim Gilarayas or Desire of Shmitas Haaretz. That the observance of the sabbatical is equal to the three cardinal sins of murder, adultery, and idolatry. And so we have to understand the importance of the temple, but also understand the time and the place where we live in, and also understand why we're in exile, and not believe that this is some kind of cosmic mistake, but rather that this is part of God's plan. And so we have to be waiting patiently for the temple, like, the song Salakok Shmar says,
In 2 miles, use the right lane to take exit 22 for Independence Hall, Callowhill Street toward I-676 East.
When God decides it's the right time, then we will go home. But when will it be? Yiboneh HaMikdash Yirtzion Temalei Akales Hazman. When the temple is rebuilt and the city of Zion will be refilled, that is when it will be. We should all be worthy to see that time. And then we'll eat from the sacrifices and from the Paschal sacrifices in the Eskalas Kvod Shemayim and Meir and Amen. All right, thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment. We'll see you later. All right, how do I turn this thing off? No, I'm trying to turn this one off, not this one.